I'd like to thank Shoma, Rachel, Anna and Graham for asking me to end this conference. I'm really pleased to be able to do this. And as you can see, I'm here with two hats on. And most of you only see me with one of the hats on, which is the University of St Andrews. But I'm going to pretend to be the Vice Chair for, I still am the Vice Chair for the SDC, but only just, I think. The Sustainable Development Commission is an official government advisor on sustainable development. Our funding runs out at the end of March, with the greenest government ever cutting our funding, but cut many other people's funding at the same time. So you should be nice and warm, because we're part of the bonfire of the Quangos. So it gives you a nice warm feeling of some sort. We're not sure of our future in Scotland, but this is a big week for that, because there's there's all sorts of strategies being released this week in Scotland, but there's also the budget as well. So Mr. Swinney, I believe, has a view, but he hasn't chosen to tell us about it yet. In terms of the Sustainable Development Commission, we work very much on advocacy and around advocating within government and slightly more broadly about sustainable development solutions. We work quite heavily on capacity building, of helping those in government to try to be able to address these issues, and particularly what Peter was talking about in some of the last one. I mean, absolutely key that joining up and actually having governance to allow things to happen matters equally, as well as having resources. And then we also have a scrutiny role as well, which is to say, have you done it very well? And so we do that as well. And so it's a big task, but it's a very enjoyable one in some ways. At the University of St Andrews, as you know, I spend a lot of time talking to you and with you, I hope, in the teaching side of things. I occasionally get to do some research, and I spend a reasonable amount of time trying to shape this institution to be one that's taking sustainable development very seriously. And the photo you've got for start us off today is from Angkor Wat, which is a huge temple complex in Cambodia, right up where the Khmer Rouge used to operate. And this is one of the main entrance ways in. It's a very, very beautiful entrance. And on one side, you've got the angels, and you've got a corner of an angel there. And on the other side, you've got the demons. And so it's really trying to communicate to you as you enter this complex that life is always held in a dynamic balance between heaven and hell, and that you have to negotiate this path between the two, and some days it's heaven and some days it's hell. It's kind of like watching Scotland play New Zealand at the weekend, depending on, well, I found it heaven and hell, because I've got divided loyalties there. And so what I'm working on here in St Andrews is my wee slice of heaven, and why I'm doing that is because I care about the shape of the future and what our future might be and what other people's future might be. And I think this conference and this conference theme and the project that these guys have developed is absolutely spot on, both in general when thinking about sustainable development, but also thinking about sustainable development at this point in time. Because what we've got going on at the moment in government settings is a whole bunch of strategies and approaches going on out there. We've got a low-carbon economic strategy released today by the Scottish Government. We've got technicalities about carbon markets, about carbon trading, about the EU ETS, about sustainable transport systems, incentivising and insulation, transition. We've got the whole, everything's going on, and it's all quite technical within a government context. And these things are very important, and it's very important that we might care about those things, but it's really focusing on the technicalities of things. And what the government is quite shy of doing is actually going down to the root of the matter and talking about values, about beliefs, about people's hopes, about people's fears, and about people's aspirations. I mean, they should be talking about those kind of things, because that's a function of government to actually help host some of those conversations. But most politicians feel really quite shy about that, unless they're saying vote for me, which is an emotional appeal of some sort, I suppose. And so I think actually focusing on caring and why we might care and what we might value and what we might do as a result of it, which we've got on this glorious washing line as well, is really, really important. And if we don't do that, you get really dysfunctional effects. And I want to talk just through two dysfunctional effects, which most of you will know about. The first one is the values action gap. It's incredibly well known, it's incredibly well documented, and that people say they care, but then they act in ways that isn't congruent with caring. Now, it's very easy to say, oh, well, their desires can't be that strong. And for some people that would be the case. But it's not straightforwardly the case, but rather society's norms and society's shaping of expectations is sometimes really at odds with the things that you care about. Or there's very strong institutional barriers about actually acting out what you might care about. And some of these were, I think, dealt with really well in the water context. And so the failure of lots of values to transfer into actions and behaviours is both about an emotional response, but is also one where the emotional response has to be put within a broader societal context as well. The other place when we get dysfunctional effects if we don't actually focus on the caring side of things, as well as with the rebound effect. So when people save money on, say, energy efficiency and then go and spend it on something that's actually much more carbon intensive than the money they used to spend on energy, then you get a total increase in energy emissions from, in this case, carbon. And in the worst case, it completely wipes out the saving that's just been achieved because you put money in people's pockets and they spend it in different ways. So caring about an individual action, say like insulating your house, is also needs to spill over into people caring enough to step away from a consumer society. But that's quite hard because we shape our norms and our expectations with regard to what's around us. And so given that, I want to sort of say some things about some of the things that affect me when I try to be a good teacher, but also as I try to be a good aid to a policy process and work with people to try to actually help change what we might be doing in the world. But before that, I'm going to read you a poem. I don't think any of my students ever heard me read you a poem before, but I've got one which it's quite a vicious poem though, it's not a sweet one. I did promise you I was going to talk about love, and I might get onto that, but not yet. Okay, this is from a New Zealand poet called Honi Tūwhiri, and it's called Deliver Us. They speak in tight, esoteric voices, a special monkey language, superbly designed to conceal the very secret, very complex technological know-how of cracking nuts. Monkey-wise, a mental finger game, wholly absorbing, but which tends to reduce a mountain to a dunghill. Meanwhile, the dull excommunicants go on cracking the tougher nuts merely by bashing them with bigger rocks. One could call it a reflection on civil servants, but only if I was feeling very grumpy, which I'm not. And so what you've got is that we're trying to sort of resolve this crisis that we're facing, but it's not about, bigger rocks. It's actually about different kind of rocks, or in fact maybe it's about roasting the nuts and sort of resolving it that way rather than just bashing on and doing the same things that we've been doing before and not getting anywhere. With that in mind, I want to come back to delve into some of the themes that emerge when you care, and I want to come back to the angels and demons again. And this is my angel, but this time face on. And I want to talk about despair, and then I want to talk about hope as well. And at its simplest, despair is a loss of hope. Then the flip side is hope is looking for something desired and placing trust in it coming. And so hope sometimes could be just purely daydreaming. So I hope that Father Christmas brings me a large red Ferrari. It's not very useful kind of hope, partly because if no one's told you, he doesn't exist. And anyway, there's no low carbon Ferraris to be had, so I can't have one anyway. So what we've got to look for is something beyond hope. And this is what someone called David Orr, who I know some of you would have read, would call practical hope. And in particular, Alex, one of my PhD students, has really opened up my eyes to thinking about practical hope. So practical hope is hope that comes from doing the things before us that need to be done in the spirit of thankfulness and celebration without worrying about whether or not we win or lose. And I think that's really, really helpful because I've seen a lot of practical hope in this room today. Certainly in some of the projects that people have been, in this particular project that you guys are developing, it's about practical hope. I mean, you're going to assemble a petition and give it to politicians. I mean, you've got to be hopeful to do that, don't you? But it's practical hope. It's just getting on with it. Likewise, the lady who was speaking about Greenpeace, I mean, that's practical hope. Just get out there and do something. And not just to do anything, but think carefully about what's likely to work and what's right to do and what's just and appropriate. And likewise, millions of people around the world every day just get by on practical hope, getting up in the morning and getting on with it. And so in that respect, hope, but not sort of optimistic, unwarranted hope, but real hope is what we need. I'm also going to have a final wee rant as well, because this is my opportunity, because usually I have to teach content, whereas today I'm allowed to have a wee rant, which is quite nice. So this is the appropriate slide for a wee rant. I don't know if you've seen this. This is up Kilmartin Glen, just north of Oban in Scotland. I mean, it's huge. I mean, I can walk underneath, I'm not that short, but I can still walk underneath the hand, so it's a nice big pointing thing about what you need to do. And this rant has been inspired partly by some policy work we're involved in at present, and in particular by reading the low carbon economic strategy that came out today. And the low carbon economic strategy has loads of really good stuff in it. It's got lots of things that Scotland's going to do in terms of developing renewables, green jobs, all of those sorts of things. And you can't really disagree with a lot of that. And it's sort of a sense in which there's a hope that this strategy is suddenly going to give Scotland all this wealth that comes from a green economic source. We're going to make lots of turbines, we're going to have lots of offshore wind, we're going to lose lots of knowledge, etc, etc, etc. So delighted. But what's quite interesting in that strategy is there's no mention in that strategy or anywhere else in government what we're going to stop doing. And so, for example, and I think Greenpeace is very good at pointing out some of these things, and particularly the lady was talking about it, we're not going to stop exploiting oil and gas. In fact, we're just sort of trying to enter another whole phase of getting into more deep sea drilling. We're not going to stop having coal power fire stations, but we're going to somehow have carbon capture and storage, probably. And so there's loads of things that I think is really sort of being sort of fudged in the political domain at the moment, is that people are saying, oh, I like all these things, but they never say the corollary, which is, well, I don't like these things, I'm going to stop doing them. And yet we have to if we're going to meet some of the targets we're heading for within climate change. So I thought I'd take some of my own medicine and tell you what I don't care about. I think there was somebody who put some of these on the washing line as well. Good bit of joined up thinking. So I don't care if you're smart, I don't care if you're beautiful, I don't care if you're well known, I don't care if you have 1.4 million friends on Facebook, although when they mocked up mine I got Obama for a friend, so I thought that was pretty cool, but I don't care about that either. I don't care if you're a professor, I don't care if you're a sir, a chief of this and that, a boss, I don't care if you're the Prince of Wales, I don't care if you're an intellectual, I don't care if you're a captain of industry. I actually don't give a stuff. That's one of the advantages of being a New Zealander, is that we don't care about those things. What I do care about, though, is I care that you are humble, you're wise, kind, generous, creative and thoughtful. I care that you're angry, I care that you're impatient, I care you're touched, I care that you're horrified by what you see around you in the world. I care that you'll buy into practical hope, and I also care that you're here today, that you've taken the time to listen, that you've given me the time to have a wee chat to you as well about hope and those sorts of things.